Great. So I think people are still joining, but in the interest of time, we will get things moving. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Sarah Kester. I'm the Interim Director of Global Community Engagement at the Sabin Vaccine Institute, currently leading the Boost community. And I'm really excited to welcome you today to our panel discussion and co-creation session entitled Co-Creating Equitable Approaches to COVID-19 Vaccine Delivery. This is a presentation on behalf of the COVID-19 Vaccine Equity Project, which my colleague Emma will share a bit more about momentarily. Molly, would you mind going to the next slide? So we have a packed agenda today. We are really excited to feature two panel discussions. One featuring Anne Lindstrand from WHO to share the global state of play with regards to COVID-19 vaccine and vaccine distribution. And then a panel discussion with three members of the Boost community. So really trying to share national and subnational perspectives from immunization professionals around the world as they prepare for COVID-19 vaccine delivery and distribution in their contexts. We will also be sharing a bit more about the COVID-19 Vaccine Equity Project, sharing a readout from the most recent survey that we shared with the Boost community. And then at the end of the session, we're going to be going into a very interactive co-creation session to really hear from you all about the challenges, the support, and the enablers that you feel that you need to prepare for a COVID-19 vaccine. Next slide, Molly. Oh, and just a few norms before we jump into the presentations. The first being, please mute your mic. This is a meeting, not a webinar, so we do hope this is quite interactive, but please mute your mic while you're not speaking. I would encourage everyone to introduce yourself and share your thoughts in the chat, particularly your name and where you're joining us from. And also, as we go along, please ask questions of presenters or of any of the facilitators on the line. Please be respectful of other comments and questions. This is a safe learning space. We are all here to share our own experiences, and we really want to create a space for that. Actively participate in your breakout rooms. As I said, we'll be doing some very interactive discussions at the end of this session. So we encourage you, if possible, to turn on your video, really be an active participant in those breakout sessions. And then finally, share your feedback. We'll be sharing a brief survey at the end of this presentation, but we really want to learn how we can make these most valuable for you and improve on them in the future. So with that, I will turn it over to my colleague, Emma.
Hello, everyone. Again, echoing Sarah's warm introduction. Thank you all so much for being here today. My name is Emma Eriksson, and I am part of the Dahlberg team and one of the project leads on the COVID Vaccine Equity Project. I am from Kenya originally, but currently based in London. So Molly, can you go to the next slide? So I'm going to give you a bit of an overview of the COVID Vaccine Equity Project. While our project works at the global and regional level, the COVID-19 Vaccine Equity Project really takes a country-first approach, collaborating directly with country governments and with immunization professionals like yourself to help assess the country readiness and preparedness efforts and to support countries as they prepare for the implementation of the COVID-19 vaccine. And our aim along the way is to bolster country level capacity and expertise, and also to support the immunization community going forward, not just in this moment of the COVID-19 vaccine, but to help strengthen the situation overall, the system overall. Molly, to the next slide. So how do we differentiate ourselves? These are 5 of the different ways that we work. We really try to address needs. So we don't come in with any sort of agenda. We have long-standing and trusting relationships with stakeholders across the sector, And what we do is we try and understand from country stakeholders what the needs really are, and then support based on those needs. We try to ensure equity in process and in outcome. It's right there in our name, the COVID Vaccine Equity Project. And so one of our guiding principles is to ensure representation from countries and communities that will shape the work in countries, but also will bubble up to the regional and global level to make sure that the COVID-19 vaccine equity and vaccine introduction is as equitable as possible. We are agile and inclusive, and what that means is if there's anything that we can't address ourselves, we will look for the right people to address those gaps. And so, our aim is to bring in other partners where necessary. As I said, we aim to build longer-term systemic change, not just for the emergent needs at the moment with the COVID-19 pandemic, but also looking into the future in immunization programs that are going to be supporting life course immunization. And finally, we amplify experts, and those are experts like you. We hope to work very closely with the immunization community, and through Boost, we really hope to bring this community into the work as much as possible. So how do we work? And Marley, this is the last slide. We started off by planning, and the planning really involved understanding everything that was going on at a global level, what some of the global guidance was going to be, trying to understand some of the emerging information about vaccine candidates, etc., and then select 2 to 4 priority countries that we could really begin this process with. And so now we're in the pilot stage. And what we're doing now is using the VIRAF, the Vaccine Introduction Readiness Assessment tool that all the countries are responsible for producing as part of COVAX, and understanding where the country readiness is at the moment, and trying to identify those gaps and needs so that we can support countries with a way forward. As we scale, we're looking to just work very closely with ministries of health and emergency operations centers to really operationalize the plans and ensure that the immunization programs are equipped for vaccine rollout. And then after the vaccines are introduced, make sure that there is, enough support within the ministries of health and within emergency operations centers by making sure that countries have access to a global pool of technical experts. So we are the COVID-19 Vaccine Equity Project, and we're extremely excited to kind of partner with the Boost community today. As I mentioned, we work at the global and national level, and so I wanted to hand over to our global team and to Trevor Zimmer, who's going to introduce this first panel and talk a little bit about the global state of play. To Trevor.
Thank you so much, Emma. I appreciate it. And we're really grateful to have Ann Lindstrom join us today. And I know Ann can only join us for 20 minutes, so I'm going to keep the introductions brief. But thank you everyone for joining this, this conversation today. We hope this is one of many webinars, both to share out what we're doing with the COVID-19 Vaccine Equity Project, hear what your needs are, especially via equity, as we are looking to introduce the vaccine, see how we could design COVID-19 Vaccine Equity Project to better help you within EPI programs, and for you to actually share insights for us to share back up with kind of global and regional institutions and players. There's no one better to represent that than Ann Lindstrom, who is the unit head of the EPI at WHO global level. She's also one of the co-leads for the country readiness delivery workstream at COVAX. So we're really thrilled and grateful for her to join us today and share her insights to kind of country level decision makers, EPI managers, ministries of health on how countries should be preparing for vaccine introductions. So with that, I'd love to, ask Ann, We know that the great news that's been in the press over the last few weeks, with vaccines showing so many promising results and expected to receive emergency authorization and regulatory approvals in the coming weeks. The world is really, I know you and I feel this in our own work, is really starting to pay attention to vaccines as one of the ways to overcome the effects of the pandemic. And we know that not everyone in each country can be vaccinated at the same time. So, COVAX is providing some guidance on what that prioritization might look like. But, if you're, in a country level EPI program, Ministry of Health or NITAG, what trade-offs should countries really consider when prioritizing the first tranche of vaccines delivered in countries? And what data and information do countries need in order to kind of make these decisions and execute on them? And you're muted.
Yes, so thank you, Trevor, and thank you, everyone. It's a delight to be here. First, I just want to say that nobody knows how to do what we're doing currently. This is a vaccine introduction of never seen speed and scale before. So each conversation like this one today is useful to all of us, because we've not done any vaccine introduction like this one, with so many complexities. And at the speed and scale, as I said before, the countries will have to, or are right now, in tight and very intense work of doing the planning of what should happen in their countries. And to your question, when it comes to the prioritized groups, we know that in the beginning there will be scarcity in number of doses. And right now, when the countries are preparing, they don't even know which vaccine they will get, actually. Because, as you said, the regulatory authorization is coming speedily now, but it's not only the regulatory authorization, it's also the product and the manufacturing of the number of doses that will be in scarcity, as I said in the beginning. So most likely, if the countries are the AMC, the COVAX facility AMC 92 countries, which is a commitment for them to get 20% of their doses through the COVAX facility at a heavily subsidized price. So the countries right now, the task teams in each countries, and many of you certainly are helping in that, I hope, is doubling down on supporting the ministries of health to write what is called the National Deployment and Vaccination Plan. And then those choices of who should get the vaccines first needs to be made, right? I think the key is, and what makes it complicated here, is they don't know how many doses and they don't know which vaccine from the beginning. So the planning needs to be, if we get this vaccine in so many doses, that's how we do it. If we get this many doses of this vaccine, we'll do it this way. If we get two vaccines at the same time, how would we then collectively, put these vaccines forward? The data that is needed are, of course, on the risk groups that needs to be covered first. So the advice is very clear from the SAGE working group in that the prioritized groups at the very beginning, when there are few doses, should be those at highest risk of being impacted by the COVID-19 infection. It is the high risk, not even every healthcare worker. In the beginning, it's those that are closest up with patients of COVID, or who are at the highest risk, maybe those at the front line, those taking care of acute, severely infected patients. But it's also the elderly that we know very well are one of the weakest and most affected by this infection. And then as the vaccine number of doses will come in greater numbers, there will be a rollout of additional target groups that could be included, including medical risk groups in different ages, but also other occupational categories, teachers, and even if you have a low transmission area, it could be people like airport staff, or so those that or travelers that travel in and out of the country to stop the transmission from coming in if you are at a low risk country. So the key consideration is outlined in the roadmap towards prioritization of target population from SAGE, and it's very clear that you need data on the epidemiologic situation of the country, the number estimated of all the possible target groups, and then you have to make choices and a plan for introduction slowly by slowly each of those, and hopefully keep to the principles that also SAGE laid out, the 6 principles of really looking at those that needs the dose first. They should be prioritized so that there is a fair allocation, but also the most impact on the pandemic that we're living through at the moment. There will be another part which is the most vulnerable groups, those that may be beyond the eyes of governments. So those are in humanitarian settings, the fragile populations, which also include, of course, the high priority target groups, the elderly, the medical risk groups. And those have been set aside in a humanitarian buffer, about 5% of the doses. And that is being discussed, how that will be rolled out, maybe through humanitarian actors. But that is not really clear exactly the mechanism yet. But also those populations, of course, needs to be served like all other risk groups. So I think that is key. There are guidance out now, the National Deployment Vaccination Plan, as you mentioned, and so on. So there are some key elements that can help countries then estimate the number of target groups to make those very difficult choices, actually.
Thank you very much, Anne. Certainly the work that you're helping, facilitate and create at the WHO level, and as well as COVAX from VIRAT and DVP are going to be key guides and guidance, for countries to get ready and to also connect to regional global efforts to support countries to get ready. So we've, that's very much noted, and I know that countries are like kind of deeply involved in the kind of VIRAT and now starting to the NDVP planning processes, and so I believe that's probably familiar to everyone on this call. And if it's not, it should be. So I guess in addition, kind of VIRAT NDVP, what do you think, what is your guidance, I guess, to countries themselves on what they should be doing now to prepare? Just to, we know that we don't know which vaccines are going to make it to which country when. So I think you kind of allude to some scenario planning. But, based on the scenario planning, those options, like what's like the next step countries should be planning to, receive these vaccines, in the next quarter or so?
There are many immediate steps that countries need to take actually right now. One of them is oversee their regulatory system so that when the vaccines will be allocated, they will have a swift process for getting a regulatory approval in countries, unless they have then, so that we are sure that the doses can be released, because otherwise that will be a roadblock. There are other things like, how would you set up that the entry point doesn't stop the vaccines from coming in? So the regulatory, just the logistics of receiving the doses and getting them into the countries. I think one key thing that will be maybe a stop blocker as well is the operational cost of delivery. So the PPE, the protection for healthcare workers, the per diem, the transport, the supply chain, etc. I think the funding parts, the operational costs are key, and some, at least the World Bank, will be helping with this. So I think one key thing is work with the World Bank and make those applications if there are gaps in your needs, both on the technical assistance, but also for the operational costs. It's said to be used for both the vaccine, the co-financing or procurement, the TA, the technical assistance, and health system strengthening. But make sure that also the operational day-to-day planning of the rollout will be included. And so that's really, really key, I think. I think also communication, really getting the discussion going on and the buildup of trust in the society for the processes, the fair allocation, and explaining why in the beginning not everyone will have access to the vaccines. So develop and be able to, maybe through the NITAGs or through your competent EPI management team, to send out information that actually gives an honest and good scientific update of the vaccines coming, so that people are prepared. Because I think key to this rollout will maybe not be the supply side so much. It may be, but we know somehow how to do that and get that done. I think early communication to populations, explaining every step of the way, will be key, because this whole pandemic will not be halted by vaccines unless people take them.
Yeah, I actually, have a question on that, Anne. We when we're thinking about, the vaccine, so much focus is on first the R&D process and the phase 3 trials, regulatory approvals, and then of course is on ultra cold chain and distribution. But of course, all is for naught unless people actually take it. So, how should countries be starting to engage civil society, mobilizing communities, thinking not just about EPIs, but community healthcare workers, kind of activating, those different networks and channels to start making sure that not only are those priority populations like targeted, prioritized, but they're actually willing to receive the vaccine and accept it. What role do you think, country governments and ministries of health to play in that?
Well, I think the role of the National Immunization Technical Advisory Group will be key here. But it's also about that having everyone around the table. So if you have in country an ICC or a task team that works on the COVID vaccine delivery and readiness at the moment, of course the CSO should be part of that planning and work. And so you have a wide range of possible actors that can be included, right? It's the CSOs, it's the religious leaders, it's maybe some prominent scientists in your country, and above all, if there are any social behavioral scientists, to really bring them in at the heart of the communication around this, propelled out from the Ministry of Health, with possibilities for, I think what is very key as well, and that we have to get right, is the knowledge of the healthcare workers, and getting them involved very early. So beyond the public facing communication and trust generation for the process, the vaccines, and get the buy-in, you also need to get that from the healthcare workers. So early on training, explaining, so they own the knowledge themselves and can be explaining to populations about the importance and everything they know about the vaccines, so that they can answer to the populations when they have worries, right?
Great. Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. I know via our Boost survey, the fortunate thing is there's EPI managers at subnational and national levels are thinking quite a bit about this community mobilization, vaccine acceptance. So I'm happy to hear that. And cognizant we only have a few more minutes with you. So, there's a lot of questions in the chat really about like kind of multi-dose candidates and booster shots. I think, some questions around what indicators should be considered in the process of delivering and distribution of COVID-19 vaccines, considering routine vaccines must have met the distribution storage channel quota, as well as, I guess, questions about like multi-dosing and boosters. And so I think the implication is that, how should countries be thinking about, their immunization programs writ large, not just COVID-19 vaccines, as well as how should they be thinking about mobilizing this, supply chain for like, boosters, multi-dose, and some of those nuances around these specific candidates.
Wow, I will have to answer each one here. There's so many good questions here. Nina Schwable, you're asking about the multi-dose vials. It seems like most of the candidates will be sometime between maybe 10 or 20 vial sizes. The single dose vials, I haven't seen any of the producers so far saying they will. There will be in all the candidates now 2-dose regimen, which should be planned for, which of course complicates things. We were hoping that maybe some of the vaccines would be a 1 dose, but not what we can see. So to the indicators considered in the distribution and the delivery will be mapped out little by little in the supply guidance that has been the more detailed one that has been put up on the TechNet, so you can go and see, which is a draft right now. We are currently working on the other indicators because there will be many others that are important. What we're considering is to use the EGRF that is being rolled out next year to a monthly roll-up of some data, if that's possible. But we're also working with DHIS2 and others to see if we could use existing platforms and adapt them for the COVID-19 vaccine monitoring as well. So the duration of protection, we have no clue at the moment. Honestly, we do not know. The clinical trials have not been going on for a long time. So if this is long-term immunity or lifetime, it's actually impossible to see at the moment. I'm trying to see all the questions here. Trevor, help me. Which one didn't I answer?
Yeah, no, I think that's pretty good. I think, how about the routine, vaccines? I guess the last question before you kind of sign out, and this has been incredibly valuable, and we're really, really grateful for your time. How about, how do immunization programs manage this when they're already very busy with everything else?
Well, that is the key question, Trevor, isn't it? Yeah. Right? Yeah.
Yes.
The health workforce team in WHO has estimated we will be needing some kind of 200,000 extra healthcare worker hands or people to be able to do the big rollout, which is coming mainly in Q2 and then ramping up for Q3 and Q4 during next year, right? It starts slow in Q1 and then it ramps up. I think the challenge right now for immunization programs is where will you find those healthcare workers actually doing the delivery and helping out at the site of immunization? It can be also non-vaccinators that help in the finding the target population and organizing around and administrating doing the administration around it as well. So a search that is needed now, very, very important. And probably people will have to mobilize students, retirees, et cetera, and then be mindful again of planning carefully. the rollout of this is not like any other campaign, probably. I mean, it's really an introduction of a vaccine that will be done at a fast speed. And I think that every one of us needs to be mindful that this is not supposed to be a huge vertical program that presses out any other essential health service activities at the same time, but really be mindful of organizing so that if the healthcare workers need to leave the routine immunization for a certain moment of time, be really, really sure then to be able to catch up and find those children who missed out during the time they were out, or just assess if there is any possibility of upholding the hugely important routine immunization on essential health services at the same time. So this is key. It really is important. I'm wary that we will have collateral problems, just like COVID came on essential health services and the consequences that has for health in general.
Well, thank you, Anne. We're incredibly grateful for your time. Your insights are invaluable as usual. We'll be tracking along with all of your work via COVAX, country readiness delivery. We know you have to go over to another meeting, so we'll keep sharing the insights as they bubble up for Vaccine Equity Project. And I'll see you later today. Take care.
I would have wanted to stay and hear what you said. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. And Anita, over to you.
Thanks, Trevor. Hi, everyone. My name is Anita Aibogu. I'm a consultant with Dalberg Advisors. I'm based in Lagos, Nigeria, and I'm also working with the Saving team on the COVID-19 Vaccine Equity Project. So I'm very excited to share with you all some of the learnings from the Country Needs Analysis survey that took place last month. And I'm sure that some of you would have had the opportunity to take part in. So onto the descriptive statistics, we concluded the survey with 55 responses. 50 of these respondents answered in English, but we also had responses in French and Spanish as well. We had 22 countries represented in the survey. A vast majority of these were in Africa. And we also had 10 stakeholder groups represented as well, 60% of whom work for the Ministry of Health at the national and subnational levels. But before we go into the answers from the survey in more detail, we'd like to have a poll and hear from you all that have joined in. What do you think your respective countries will find most challenging in order to introduce the vaccine by mid-2021? So please select 3 things that you think would be the most challenging and submit. Just waiting for the responses to pop up on the screen.
I don't know.
Oops, sorry, Emma. So results are coming in. Similar to what we found on the survey, resources and funding seems to be the one area where most respondents are saying their countries will find challenging. Also the vaccine distribution, cold chain and logistics, as well as planning and coordination, service delivery also getting multiple responses. So from the survey results, we also found that resources and funding would be a key challenge area, as well as demand generation and communication, and also planning and coordination. Interestingly, we found that 80% of respondents did not rank prioritization and targeting as a key challenge.
Welcome you.
No, yeah.
So Next poll, we'd like to hear from you again. We also asked respondents what makes these aspects challenging, and apart from funding, immunization professionals also identified gaps in infrastructure, as well as conflicting and aligning and coordinating stakeholder interests and priorities as pressing challenges. So on to another poll, would like to hear from you again. What type of global support do you think your country needs in order to ensure a fair approach to introducing a COVID-19 vaccine? So please select as many as apply, and then we'll see the results. Okay, just waiting again for the results to pop up.
Sure. We'll just wait another 15 seconds. There's a lot of options to read through.
Okay, so technical assistance seems to be the key one, as well as supports with coordination of regional groups and advisors, as well as access to research and information, and also development of a communication strategy. Okay, so what we found when we conducted the survey was that training and capacity building for technical skills, as well as management and leadership and coordination skills, and development of communication strategy were key areas that countries felt that they would require the most support. So some of the other questions that we asked is which specific areas of technical assistance do you feel that you need? And again, community engagement and advocacy, as well as training and supervision came up highly desired. Also data tools and target population identification also came up as highly desired areas of technical assistance. And then finally, we asked respondents which stakeholders are underrepresented and are needed in order to ensure a successful introduction of the vaccine. And a key one that came up was community-based organization. So that's the end of the presentation, but please use the chat tool to share any comments, anything that you found really interesting from the findings, or anything that you feel like your countries would also struggle with and require support as well. Okay, thank you. I'm going to hand over to Liz now for the next panel.
Great, thanks so much, Anita. I'd like to now welcome our next panel of immunization professionals and Boost community members who have been sharing their experiences with their peers on the Boost community platform over the past several months. We appreciate their contributions to that medium and are excited to have them with us virtually in person today. So it's my pleasure to introduce you all to Adahir Abubakar, a technical assistant for the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency supporting the State Routine Immunization Coordinating Center in Zamfara State, Nigeria. Dorothy Logetti, a sub-county EPI logistician at the Ministry of Health in Migori County, Kenya. And Adolphus Clark, program manager for the expanded program on immunization at the Ministry of Health in Liberia. I'll let them share a little bit more about their backgrounds in a moment, but before we launch into a few questions, I just want to remind everyone on the line that you can share your questions and comments in the chat box, and we'll try to get to a couple of questions if we have time at the end of the section. So with that, I'd like to actually start with Adahir. Adahir, if you could please introduce yourself, and then it would be great if you could share what you've been doing to prepare for the COVID-19 vaccine, and in particular, what efforts are already underway in your country, Nigeria. Over to you, Adahir.
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on where you are. I'm Adahir Abubakar, as you said. I'm supporting this Zamfara State Primary Health Care Development Agency. Under the National Primary Care Development Agency, there was the Immunization Coordinating Center. What we are doing currently regarding COVID-19 vaccine, at the national level, there is high-level advocacy, high-level intergovernment relationship and dialogue, policy and other things that were ongoing at the national level. Though I'm not part of that, but I have some information on what is going on. At the lower level, where I particularly participate, that is healthcare workers, state level, regional. What is ongoing now is trying to sensitize the communities on the COVID-19 vaccine. What is the importance of taking a shot of COVID-19 vaccine? Then who are the targets? Why will you be vaccinated against COVID-19 vaccine? Then secondly, we are trying to engage key stakeholders in the community, vis-a-vis religious leaders, community leaders, who are the gatekeepers and custodians of the culture in the community. For any successful implementation of activity in the grassroots level, in the community level, there is need to involve those people. They are the one to prepare the mind of the community on what is happening. Because we have some certain examples that happened sometimes back in the country where the vaccine was introduced in a state that lead to some lot of casualties. So in order to avoid such kind of things, community minds are being prepared for this vaccination. Just of recent, I did personal research. I asked some 300 plus people, for will you be willing to accept COVID-19 vaccine within your family? And I think I have almost like 68% respondents that say yes, they are willing to, if they have the proof that it is safe, the efficacy is okay, and there is no side effect. So those are some examples I would like to share. Then additionally, at the policy level in the state, the mind of the healthcare workers are being prepared in order to diffuse consistency in them. Because if the healthcare workers are not accepting the immunization, the COVID-19 vaccine that is coming up, it will be a challenge. They will not be able to give it and do it the right way. So their mind is being prepared on a monthly basis. Any opportunity we have, we try to put small issue of COVID-19 vaccine so that we can study their reaction and find a way of diffusing that reaction positively so that it will not impact negatively in the community. Then regarding the community level, again, I'm coming back, those at risk have been sensitized gradually, one-on-one with community volunteers on there is need to take proper precautionary measure on the COVID-19, though the vaccine is not available at currently, but there is need to prepare yourself in case the vaccine will be introduced so that you can be able to assess it easily without any fear or without any hesitation or without any AFI resistance. So those are the major things currently going on.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Adhir, for sharing. Over to you, Dorothy. If again, you could introduce yourself and answer the same question from your perspective as a Ministry of Health employee and registered community nurse in Kenya, that would be wonderful. Dorothy, I think you might be on mute.
Si mungetembea mkuu kama nimemaliza presentation. Niko kwa Zoom. Hello.
Hi, Dorothy. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Great. Over to you if you want to share some of the efforts that are underway currently in Kenya to prepare for the COVID-19 vaccine.
Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. I'm Dorothy from Kenya. I would wish to share my experience in immunization activity. Hello? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you, Dorothy. Please go ahead.
Yes. So far concerning COVID-19 vaccine, I a country that say we are not 100% ready to do the vaccination due to some hindering circumstances. That is, as Kenya being one of African country, we are still low. As Africa, we are at 33% readiness, which is very low according to the WHO requirements. But as Kenya, as a country, it is trying, it has done some trials. It is only waiting for approval from the University of it's just waiting for the approval from the University of United Kingdom, and is planning to do, will work with the frontiers, that is healthcare workers, who will be done trial. We are expecting to do 400 of the healthcare workers on the vaccine trial. So Kenya, we are still low. We have some challenges, and the challenges we are having, one might be training of healthcare workers. We have training of healthcare workers, that is capacity building. We will have a challenge with the distribution of the vaccine based on the target population, the collaboration between the national and the sub-county. We might get the still challenges. We are going to get vaccine hesitancy due to misinformation. We are also going to get hesitancy due to political alliance, because politics is also somehow hindering our immunization activity. For example, when the new vaccine is introduced, they put in that one is not correct. It is having in family planning. So that one is going again to hinder the implementation of the COVID vaccine. Also, the target population, because when you see the routine immunization, we just target under 5, but this is going to be a target population, a population which is very risky, a population, so it is going to be a bulk population. And for that, we don't have cold chain capacity. Hello?
Yes, we can hear.
I'm on the track. So we don't have cold chain capacity to hold that multitude of vaccine. Then for us to be ready, we are supposed to include in our planning society. We are supposed to include religious community. We are supposed to include community, because community is the go away. If we don't include community, we are going to have a very big hesitancy, because if we don't include community in our stakeholders meeting, then the community might despair or go away from what we are doing. Then resources, what we would wish to be supported, we would wish to be supported with the resources. As Kenya still being one of the underdeveloping country, resources to sustain the procurement of vaccine, sustainability will be a problem. So we would wish to have resources so that we can have sustainability of the vaccine. If not, we will give, then we get the defaulters.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dorothy, for sharing kind of what's going on the ground in Kenya. Appreciate that. Last but not least, we have Adolphus. I'm going to punt the same question over to you, if you could both introduce yourself and then kind of share what is going on currently in Liberia.
And thank you, Liz. And let me say good afternoon, good evening, good morning, good night, depending on your time zone. I will start my question or structure my response or answers across 4 critical areas. But the first thing I would like to begin with is the fact that we are dealing with a new vaccine, that we are in crisis time, and as a result of the ongoing health emergency, we've seen misinformation, disinformation, conspiracy around the very vaccine that we are talking about. So the question that we need to ask ourselves is that, what are the policy challenges associated with vaccine confidence and demand generation? This question, in my opinion, is extremely important because if overlooked, it has the tendency to either break an immunization program or make an immunization program the shining star. So we need to understand what are the policy challenges around vaccine confidence and demand generation. This sets the stage in terms of how then you strategize around ensuring the uptake or the acceptability of the vaccine to come. So it's extremely very important. The other thing that's also important that I'd like to just caption, because of time I wouldn't go into detail, is what I call the generation of qualitative data. I tend to look at that in 3 main categories. I look at it in terms of data relating to coverage, data relating to safety, and data relating to program evaluation. These are all 3 critical data that are needed to guide decision-making process before the use of the vaccine, during the use of the vaccine, and after the use of the vaccine. Because failure to do so could further derail or jeopardize the high-earned gains that have been made in the area of immunization. So they are very, very critical. And then, of course, workforce development, and then coaching, the strengthening of immunization supply chain, and the expansion of coaching equipment capacity. With that being said, where Liberia is at the moment. So we are currently in a situation where we are working towards meeting the December 7 deadline for submission under the COVAX facility. Countries and Gavi eligible countries, of the 92 Gavi eligible countries, Liberia happens to be one of those countries. And so we are in the process of finalizing our vaccine request application and that of the coaching equipment application for onward submission to Gavi on or before December 7. The process is not simple, like I said, because we need to answer the policy challenges around vaccine confidence in country. And so even as we think through the submission of an official application expressing our intent to have access to the vaccine, we still see high degree of uncertainties around the vaccine that countries will be given in terms of what vaccine we will have access to. We know that to date there were 4 vaccines that came up very strong, but there are still concerns with 1 out of the 4. Take, for instance, we saw the current data presented by AstraZeneca that came out at 70.4% with promising result that could go up to 90% or beyond. We saw the data from Pfizer and BioNTech coming up with 95%. We saw the data from Moderna at 94.5%. And then we also saw the data from Gamaleya at 91.4%. But the most important thing with all of these data around the effectiveness or efficacy of the vaccine is the issue of coaching. And that's where country has to make conscious decision, because it's not just the availability of the vaccine, but the storage of the vaccine to ensure that there isn't any break in the cold chain until it reaches the end user to elicit that therapeutic desire is the most important thing that has to happen. So as we think through the 4 vaccines, I remember the last COVAX meeting we held, we were proffering the issue of AstraZeneca because in our meeting, some of us who were there saw that at the time, AstraZeneca though had lower efficacy, but appeared to be the cheapest, and we could have, before the end of this year, about 200 million doses being available, which we thought was something welcoming as compared to Pfizer, Moderna, and that of Gamaleya. However, given the current situation with AstraZeneca now, we are thinking about Moderna being the second choice, solely because of the current coaching system that the vaccine is being stored on. Traditionally, most, if not all of the immunization programs are used to having a vaccine stored between either positive 2 to 8 degrees in the Pacific cold room or minus 25 to minus 15 degrees in the freezer room. So having a vaccine that has storage condition beyond those requires significant and substantial investment into coaching. So these are all the decision-making process that are being discussed in Liberia in terms of how we go about taking our first formulation of the vaccine to that of the second formulation. But I think the entire process is a learning curve because this is a vaccine that is new to the entire world, and there are still uncertainties in terms of question being answered. For instance, we still don't know what the level of immunity being conferred by the vaccine because it's just coming up. So we cannot say today if you took the vaccine, you're protected for 6 months, 7 months, 10 months, or 20 years, 15 years, or even life, because we expect these things to evolve. But the most important thing is that we are hopeful now that we have an effective public health tool that will serve as a game changer relative to controlling this pandemic. Over.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Adolphus, for sharing. We're a bit limited on time, so we're going to have to move on to the next section, but I hope in the breakout rooms we can continue some of these conversations. But I did just want to thank all of our panelists for jumping on the call. I know you have very busy schedules as you are preparing for the rollout of this vaccine, so we really do appreciate sharing your time and expertise with us. So I'm going to now hand it over to Male, who's going to introduce our breakout rooms. Over to you.
Thank you, Liz, and thank you to our panelists today for the great insight they provided all of us on the work they have been doing. Now we're gonna move to this final section of our webinar, and this one is gonna be a little bit more hands-on and interactive. So how is it gonna work? We're gonna divide this in 3 main steps. First, each one of you are gonna join a breakout room. So, and you can select the room you're gonna join in a few seconds. Then what's gonna happen, you're gonna find yourself in this room with other people that's also in the webinar and a facilitator. This facilitator will show you some questions. We're gonna take some live notes and have around a 15 minutes, 10 minutes discussion on some of those questions, like actually what do we need in order to be prepared for the delivery of the COVID-19 vaccine. And after that, we will all come back to our main room. The facilitators will share one main takeaway from the group, and then we're gonna tell you next steps, like what's gonna happen with all the great things we have done together today. So the groups are: 1, planning and coordination for the COVID-19 vaccine delivery. Then the second group is demand generation and communication of the COVID-19 vaccine. Group 3 will be about prioritization and targeting. Who are we delivering the vaccine first? How are we gonna define that? And then group 4 is distribution, cold chain, and logistics. Actually, how do we have the infrastructure there to deliver the vaccine? So I believe that something will appear in your screens right now, so you could select a group.
So Molly, there should be a button now that has popped up at the bottom of everyone's screen that says Join Breakout Rooms. And if you click on that, you should be able to select your room.
Okay, that was a ride, but that was a good ride. we had really interesting discussions. I know we are on time, but if you can stay for 3 minutes, I would love to open the mic for two facilitators just to share one big takeaway from your breakout rooms, and then we're gonna share with you the next steps of when and where we're gonna post these things, what is coming up. So planning and coordination facilitator, do you mind sharing one takeaway?
Sure, thanks, Molly. So in our group, we had a really robust discussion about the importance of integrating not just top-down planning, but also bottom-up planning. So engaging lower levels of the health system, whether it's community health workers, communities themselves, in the planning process. Not only planning, but also sort of technical assistance and engagement. So I think that's a really important thing to consider, especially as we think about community engagement and demand generation.
That's great. So I can share one takeaway from my group. It was group 2 on demand generation and communication. We touched about on different points of like who needs to be involved, what are the messages, what are the things that countries need to be prepared. But one that came up is the balance between the availability of the vaccine and like putting together strategic plans. Meaning, what happens if people get to a primary healthcare center and there are no more vaccines? How can we mitigate the risk of them not coming back for vaccines, or stop trusting the process with communication strategies when the supply actually might not be enough for the demand? With that, I'm going to open it to group 3.
Thanks, Molly. I think that's me, prioritization and targeting. Thank you. So in our breakout group, we actually got to hear some learnings from India, who have already kind of started with this targeting and prioritization. And what they've done is to develop a database with elderly population. And we kind of got to hear about the importance of including multiple stakeholders in this process. So from the regional partners to corporate hospitals, government agencies, and so on.
Awesome. Group 4, Emma, logistics.
We had amazing representatives from Indonesia, Liberia, India, and Syria. Big takeaway for me was as we think about cold chain auditing, so understanding the current state of play, thinking about not just what exists now, but what capacity will be required for the COVID vaccine over and above the capacity that is required for routine immunization. And how do we think about the cold chain infrastructure and how it parallels to equity, especially for vaccines that may require ultra cold chain. Some really interesting takeaways from our group. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And now I'm going to pass the mic to Sarah for some closing remarks. Thank you again for your time and your active engagement today.
Great. Thanks, Molly. So thank you, everyone, for sticking with us, for staying over a few minutes. And thank you all for your active participation in today's session. A special thank you to our panelists, our Boost members, and Anne, even though I know she had to leave early, and for sharing your insights. We would really encourage everyone, if you haven't already, to join the Boost community. We will continue to share this kind of content from the Vaccine Equity Project on the community feed, as well as provide you with continued opportunities to share your insights and how you're approaching COVID-19 vaccine introduction in your context. Over the next few days, keep your eyes open for a recap of this session, as well as a recording of the session. We'll also share the PowerPoint slides. Please visit vaccineequity.org. There you can sign up for updates specifically on the Vaccine Equity Project. And of course, we also have a short survey, which I mentioned at the beginning. I think Liz just posted it in the chat, but we'll also be sharing that out later as well with the recording and other resources. So thank you once again to our speakers, to all of our attendees, and we're looking forward to continuing the conversation over the coming weeks and months. Have a great day, everyone.